Okay, so today I have Jaguar Heart on with me. And Jaguar, when I came across your information and content, I think it was about 2 years ago, I found it really refreshing because I found that you just cut through the bullshit. And
Yeah.
in a society right now where we have information overload, we have a lot of false idols, we have a lot of agendas trying to destroy masculinity, femininity, and the family unit, as you're aware of.
Mhm.
And yeah, you just kind of clean that right up. You get to the point. I feel we need more of that kind of guidance in life today. I really do like to start off by going into your personal journey and what got you to where you are today, helping others.
Yeah, cool. And thank you for that feedback. It's refreshing to hear because I can be quite polarizing for a lot of people, because I push on the idea of self-responsibility a lot. So there's being responsible and then there's self-responsibility. Being responsible is like, okay, I'm responsible for the outcome, but then I don't change the behavior of the action. Self-responsibility is, oh, I'm actually the one that's creating, colluding, complying, creating everything in my life. So I take full responsibility for everything I do, every single thing, from people that have abused me to why I set that up for myself and all of that. And my journey starts in a family that didn't take responsibility for anything. And so what I learned over the years, and I was like that too, I didn't want to be responsible for a long time. But what I found is as I go deeper into the operating software of the psyche. The operating software of the psyche is what's preyed upon by society to keep us trapped in this kind of negative self-image that we all become addicted to. And people love to be controlled. They love to stay powerless. They love to feel helpless because it gets to play on a victim mentality. And so a victim may take responsibility for what they've said, but they won't take full self-responsibility for everything that they've ever created. So what we've got going on in the world, we've created it. Every single one of us has created this, and every single one of us has a sense of self-responsibility. So the polarizing aspect is I push on things like this. As an example, I did a post recently and I said, to become a man, you have to split from the mother. And true to form, I had mothers in the comments telling me I was full of shit because it was threatening their identity and threatening that they may have done something wrong or be unaware of it. And one woman commented, I remember, and she said, what is this toxic masculinity disguised as bullshit spiritual wisdom? I looked at it and I was like, this is where it's at. This is where we're at in society. Like, we can't even sit there and say, why is this triggering me? Why do I have to go straight to insult? I mean, the splitting from the mother thing is in our psychology, it's in tribal culture, it goes way back. It's the fact that we don't do it is that we have a society of men that are incapable and women like this that are saying it's toxic masculinity to want to have a healthy sense of masculinity. So I was raised in a family that was very much, it was interesting. I had like a very deep spiritual experience with my family where it was like a pre-life experience and we were sitting around a table. And this will kind of wrap it up really. And they were saying to me, we had to cage you like an animal so you could break free in a family that was so dishonest so you could learn the truth. And so then you can free others by telling them the truth. And so relative to that, it was like I saw the perfection in everything. And then what happened is I started to go, well, I need to take self-responsibility for everything. And how do I do that? I have to be responsible for the operating software of the psyche and figure out how that works because I know what doesn't work and then I know what does work. And so I had to go through destruction, drugs, womanizing, all sorts of, you could claim toxic behaviors, but they're just compensations in order to get to the point where knowing what wasn't right helped me to understand what was right and what works. And it's not necessarily for me about eliminating your shadow or overcoming your dark parts or healing. Rather, it's about we've got half bad, half good, and it's about becoming whole and integrating that. And that's full self-responsibility. So bless my family for giving me the beautiful opportunity to do that. Although it didn't appear that way, it was definitely that way on a spiritual level.
Yeah, families tend to be your greatest teachers, don't they?
Yeah. Relationships and family.
Yes, for sure. Yeah, it's interesting you say all that. I've recently been going on my own personal journey in relation to patterns that I keep repeating in my life. And I find that even though I'm quite logical and switched on intellectually, there are things that happen where it overrides my logic.
Mm-hmm.
And I realized that I was actually coming from like a place of trauma as a child, and I was using compensatory behaviors to survive in these moments that triggered those traumas. And that overrid my logic. So I thought, what's going on here? Because I'm a switched on girl. I know what's going on. I can see it, but I can't control my reactions.
Yeah.
And so yeah, I started to go real deep in the childhood stuff and release a lot of those, I guess, subconscious programs, or rewrite them, or I guess when you shed light on them as well, they have less power over you.
Yeah.
And then I noticed from that moment, uh, my life has really changed. And I thought to myself, this whole time, I feel like I've been making decisions or reacting from those traumatized lower parts of me, the
Yeah.
shadow parts. And now that I've worked through those, I can see things so much clearer, I can deal with things so much better. And I thought to myself, like, how many people are walking around at the moment where their 5-year-old self or their, 7-year-old self that had something happen to them, and they're still wired in that state and responding from that place?
Yeah, that most people,
Yeah.
like probably 99.9999999% of people are still walking around with that stuff controlling them. I have like a bit of a different view of trauma because most people say, I am the way that I am because of my trauma.
Mm.
That's what it means. Whereas I sit there and go, how are you deriving meaning from your trauma in order to derive some sort of purpose from the world that keeps you trapped in the trauma?
Mm.
It's very slight in its difference because it's like one is reactive, which is like, oh, well, that's just the way that I am. And the other is like, it's reactive as well, but it's a bit more creative. So it's like, well, I'm giving this meaning to stay in a victim mentality. So when you're talking about patterns, patterns are the end of the chain. So it's like at the basic level, everything's a vibration. The vibration informs the word creates a language creates a code creates a program. This is our subconscious. Each one of these has a set of thoughts that goes with it. Thoughts inform feelings. Feelings drive behaviors. Behaviors produce results. Results create experiences, and experiences repeat and form patterns.
Mhm.
So most people are trying to fix things at the behavior and the results end. Case in point, New Year's resolutions. But that's reactive to something I don't want. So if I want health, it's because I'm not healthy. If I want to lose weight, it's because I'm overweight. So they don't really go anywhere. So when people are trying to crack the pattern at the pattern level, it doesn't usually work. It just reinforces the pattern because I'm saying I don't want it. Then we develop resistance to it. The resistance, when we push on something, it's going to be met with an equal force, and that perpetuates it. So we have to go outside of the idea of who we think we are to get to the deeper layers of the negative programming, then the negative emotional attachments. Once we combine that, then we can be free from the pattern, and we realize we don't need to fight the pattern. The pattern just dissolves because we've brought unconscious into conscious. That's an integration, and that's emerging. That pattern doesn't need to show up for you to see the very thing you're trying to fight against by breaking the pattern.
Mm.
There was a
It's,
fair bit in that. Sorry, I just kind
yeah,
of went off there, but
I see that as like not resisting and working with things, with flow. And I think that's, yeah, really an effective way to address those core issues.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. Because we have addictions. Most people think addictions are like um, food, sex, drugs, alcohol. They're not. They're the behaviors we use to reinforce the negative emotional addictions of deprivation, denial, being controlled, feeling helpless, feeling powerless, being rejected, being abandoned, being unloved, and being humiliated. That's what we're addicted to. So our negative self-image reinforces those addictions by tricking us to think that the behavior is the problem when it's not. And
Mm,
so we have to bring those two together in order to dissolve it, because then we become whole. And then when we bring something into the light, it doesn't control us anymore. We're only controlled by something that's unconscious. Once
yeah.
you make it conscious, it stops controlling you.
And do you think all of these, I guess, emotions and programs start as a child, from your family dynamics? Because I do think that. But the way I see it is like as we are continuing in society, do you think we can eventually get to a point where children are not going to be so traumatized, not traumatized, but develop these behaviors and coping mechanisms as a result of the environment they're in. Because like, I get it, no family's ever perfect, no one is ever perfect, but can we at least like improve as a society and not be more conscious with parenting and avoid, you know, making it so hard for people to have to work through these things, if that makes sense.
For sure. I actually think trauma, we come here and we're connected as children. Children are pure. You know, one thing that I don't agree with in the Christian space is we're born sinners. Look into the eyes of a child. That child's not a sinner. It's fucking ridiculous that that is kind of placed upon it, you know, and I just don't agree with it. I'm around a lot of friends with kids and they're so innocent and pure. And so what I think we do is we come here pure to understand what it's like. We accumulate traumas through events and resignations and disappointments and letdowns and failures. They stack on top. Then we develop logic and reasoning around 7 or 8 years old. Then we're meant to develop that part of us so we can transcend these events we call traumas, so we can understand what it's like to be innocent and pure. That's what I think the game is about. And I've gone through that. And when you see it, you see the utter magnificence of this whole architecture we're in is designed for that reason. And I've done this thousands of times and it keeps arriving at the same answer. And that's what I believe we're here for. So traumas can own us or they can be an access point for our own transcendence.
Yeah. Yeah, I totally agree with that too. So let's go on to a very important topic at the moment. I find that like masculinity is getting quite attacked these days.
Yeah.
And I feel like the role that men play in society is very important because in order for a woman to be able to surrender into a feminine, we need a man to 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 hold that space. And I feel like by destroying masculinity, then the feminine struggles as well.
Yeah.
Because yeah, so I really want to get into what do you see happening? What are the issues that men face today?
Yeah, it's femininity collapses in the absence of masculinity. So it's like, you know, the yin and yang symbol, right? It's a white drop with a black circle, black drop with a white circle. Most people miss that it's encased within a circle. And so if masculinity, I mean, I was just talking about this the other day around leadership, right? Men are typically the leaders. That's where we think differently to women. Women think horizontally, men think vertically. So we're very good at single focus. Women are excellent at multitasking. So they can be cooking, doing the hair, driving the car, feeding the kid, talking to a friend on the phone, watching the traffic. I can't do two things at once, right? I'm like, you know, a surgeon or a sniper, whereas a woman's more like managing all the landmines on the battlefield, right? So we're meant to think differently. Leaders are more top down. So we prioritize our thinking from 1 to 5. I'll have, right, this is what I got to do today. Then number 2 goes to number 1 and problems move up the chain. So I go single focus and I just handle stuff. So what we've got is a lack of the ability to understand leadership from the actual level with which it was created, to the point that in polarity teachings, it's like we have to tell men these days, this gets so frustrating for me. Like leadership is like, hey babe, I'll pick you up at 8:30, wear that red dress I like. It's like, really? That's where we've gotten to in leadership, that you have to train someone to tell their woman what he wants her to wear. No, I'm like, this is ridiculous. Leadership is like, firstly, can you lead yourself? It's like you have to have the ability to solve complex problems quickly and reliably and have a history of good decision making under pressure. That's what a leader is, not telling you to wear a red dress they like. That's just somewhat romantic. But this is where we've gotten to in the state of masculinity. Masculinity has been really beaten down from women trying to be men through feminism. Now, there's sort of two things with feminism, which is like equal pay, equal rights. That's not what I'm talking about relative to this. I'm talking about like the explosion of sexual promiscuity, female empowerment, all that sort of stuff, which is wrapped up under the guise of I can do anything better than a man. It's like, you can do a lot of stuff better than a man. It's natural to your biology. And so men have been suppressed now more and more and more. Like, you just got to go into my comments and you see how many times I get called toxic masculinity by women. I don't ever get it from men. If I might have had it 3 or 4 times from men that would be extremely feminine and effeminate. And that's what we're going to in society, because if you break down the ability of strong men to lead through insult and, you're just because you're born male, you're toxic, you're a rapist, domestic violence results and all. I saw someone post something about that the other day. What they don't get is, yes, men are more physically violent, women are more psychologically violent. And if you look at the rates of child abuse, this is childwelfare.org in America. The number one abuser of children is women by a long shot. And it's shocking to hear it, but the mothers are the most abusive to their children, single mothers, most abusive. Not a stat that I want to hear, not a stat that I like to share, but nevertheless, that's the truth of it. Because, and even in this, we have women in my comments addressing me as toxic masculinity. I'm like, I'm a man. I'm a very masculine man. I know what it takes to be a man. And you're telling me that what I know is not true. That's gaslighting, by throwing insults and slander. So when we look at this, like, men are being brought up to be more feminine, more, I'll try and find this list. Actually, I shared it on a podcast the other day. It was by a men's group, one of the bigger ones out there. And it was talking about the healthy masculine traits. And I'll try to find this because it's super important. And the traits on it, I matched it up with the stereotypical, cool, I've got it here, the stereotypical traits of masculine and femininity. So the Harvard aspects of femininity, stereotypical, this is a long-term study. This is not my opinion. This is Harvard long-term studies. Femininity, nurturing, agreeable, collaborative, adjusting, modest, emotional, warm, restrained, interdependent, relational, other promotional, patient, connected, follower, context dependent, and humble. So these are stereotypical feminine traits. This list of 10 or so healthy masculine traits were done by, I can't remember the group, but I will find it. Healthy masculinity, the common tenets. 1, embracing and expressing a full range of emotions. Harvard, typical stereotypical feminine traits is emotion. Number 2, validating the feelings of others. Number 3, being willing to cry. Number 4, being vulnerable, asking for help. Number 5, valuing the lives of girls and women. I mean, the fact that valuing the life of something is on a list of healthy masculinity means not valuing the life of anyone is toxic masculinity. And that's not true. It's like, that's discriminatory just by putting that on that list, because the opposite of that indicates that it's unhealthy masculinity that produces the opposite, which it's not. Treating all people equally. This is anti-competition, and yet feminism says you should compete with men, but healthy masculinity is anti-competition, which men need competition. Number 7, never using control or violence. Over a woman or someone weaker, definitely not, but violence can save people's lives. There's a difference between a weapon and a tool. A weapon is when violence is used unconsciously and you're out of control. A tool is when it's used to protect someone. They're very different worlds, those two. Number 8, never used gender-based attributes to bully or discriminate. That statement in and of itself, being on a healthy masculinity list, is discriminatory by virtue of it being on a healthy masculinity list, right? Number 9, never use language to denigrate women and girls, but it's okay for them to come and absolutely slay me with insults on my comments page, but it doesn't apply to that, doesn't apply to them. Number 10, having an interest in women and girls outside of sex. Having female friends and mentors, express emotions freely, becoming nurturing, and validate the feelings of others. So if you want to draw a correlation, they're all typically feminine traits that they're saying is healthy masculinity. Now, the stereotypical masculine traits by Harvard: self-reliant, assertive, competitive, influencing, confident, analytical, brilliant, decisive, independent, individual, self-promotional, risk taker, separate, leader, context independent, bold. So you see, none of those qualities are on that list of healthy masculinity. It's all typically feminine traits. So this is what we're up against. It's like women want men to be vulnerable. And I think the vulnerability aspect is being able to be emotionally intelligent, being aware of your emotions, but not spilling them out. Men are the space holders. We want to be empty. Women want to be full. I've said this so many times. It's like a woman that wants a man to come home and cry in her arms because he's had a hard day. She wants to mother him. She wants a child in the form of a man. and she won't respect him over time. And it doesn't matter what that woman says, there's an imbalanced, inverted construct that's playing out in that. A woman wants to be able to go, babe, I'm upset or whatever. And the guy just goes, just give it to me, babe. I've got you. That's it. Not try to fix it, not try to change it. It's just, can I hold you for a minute? Give it to me. I'll take all of it. It's all right. Give it to me. But in a healthy way, not abuse or manipulation, but upset, sadness, being emotional, and don't try to fix it. Like that's what they want. A woman doesn't want to come home and then have to go, come on, babe, give it all to me. You've had a hard day. The guys are bullying you. You know, you're not making enough. She doesn't want to know that. And this is just, it's biology. It's like, it's in our DNA and our biology. So we're up against it. But I do see a resurgence at the moment. And we're kind of in the space of adolescent masculinity, like with Andrew Tate, all that sort of stuff coming out, get strong, make money, all that's kind of like, he's not saying anything new. He's not original. There's nothing in there that he's saying that is this groundbreaking revelation. All he represents is a very, very, very needed, in some ways, aspect of masculinity. That's how desperate we are for masculine leaders, is he's the idol. He's not an idol. Like, he's disgusting what he's done in the past. I think he's very intelligent. He speaks incredibly well. He's very articulate. His history with his father being in the CIA is questionable at the absolute best and probably ridiculous at the worst. But this is how desperate we are. So what we need is, like, he's sort of like the testosterone-fueled teenager, like the bully in the schoolyard that leads everyone. And that's kind of where we're at. There's like a resurgence to that. And then I think what will come after is more the work that I'm trying to share and do, which is more mature masculine men, which can be dangerous if they want to be, but have it under control, that know how to say no, that operate from a sense of authenticity, that have overcome their childhood trauma. Because what we're seeing as well is the red pill movement, which I'm probably sure you're aware of. Like red pill, which is like, it's so utterly pathetic, the red pill movement, because their barrier to entry to be a high value male is don't be fat, don't be married, make more than $100,000 a year, and don't be 5'4". If that's your barrier to entry for a high value male, our society's in real trouble. Real trouble. Like, I think I did that female delusion calculator test, and I'm like 0.02% of males, but it doesn't take into anything of like, am I on point? Am I on purpose? Have I overcome my childhood trauma? Do I understand the female nature? Not from a hypergamous, monkey branching bullshit biological aspects, because they take biology, but not morality into account. So they think women are just these biological machines that are just, she's not yours, it's just your turn. But they have no space for mature morality, which is part of who we are and what makes us up. That's why people aren't out murdering, doing all that sort of stuff, because there's a check internally that goes, I'm not going to do that. That's not right. And so the barrier to entry to be a high value male is extremely low, and conveniently puts those guys into it because it's not very hard to get into that group.
I'm glad you brought up Andrew Tate, because I do feel like in the beginning when he was coming out and speaking, I was like, yes, there's a guy that's showing men that they need to step it up. They need to be more in their testosterone, blah, blah, blah. And then as time went on, I was like, oh, I'm not really resonating with what he's saying, because he's still, I think, at a primitive level,
Yeah.
and
Immature level.
yeah. And he, I guess, supports kind of masculine promiscuity, where it's okay to feel with someone and look at other women or whatever.
Yeah.
And that's where I draw the line. And this is where my biggest issue is, where there are so many people out there who justify masculine promiscuity to men having high testosterone, and it's just natural for them to go to multiple women. But I think that's a very primitive thing, and I think that that's a man that's not in touch with himself and his emotions. So I think that's another issue where, and the sad thing is, there are women out there that are accepting that and allowing that, and thinking it's okay, as long as he provides for me, there can be multiple women. And I mean, each to their own, but personally, I don't think that's a conscious, healthy dynamic.
It's not. It's like what they're using is raw biology. And I've got high testosterone. I don't need to go out and sleep with a lot of women. I could if I wanted to. I have done that before. That's because I couldn't control my lust, not because I had high testosterone. It's garbage. And it's like they want to use that as an excuse to be completely irresponsible. So they talk about, Rich Cooper's another one who I've mentioned in a couple of podcasts before. He was on a podcast recently, And some guys asked him, they said, so what do we do about the world? And he goes, enjoy the decline. Like, this dude wrote a book called The Unplugged Alpha, but then says he's not an alpha. But if you're writing a book called The Unplugged Alpha, by proxy, you're calling yourself an alpha. And you're sitting there saying, just enjoy the decline. Like, could you be any more effeminate and passive by just letting the world burn? That's not what men are built for. It's not what men are built for. We're meant to, the highest expression of masculinity is sacrifice. There's not protection, it's not provision, it's not testosterone, it's not sleeping with heaps of women. It's to be sacrificial. That's what we're here to do. We are the disposable sex, and it's to be sacrificial. You sacrifice because that's our burden that we have to take on. And these guys are sitting around going, yeah, just enjoy the decline. It's like, I can't grasp that. I can't. And so it seems fraudulent to me to say that. At least Andrew Tate's kind of fighting for guys to stand up against something. Whereas other people in that space, it's like, I just don't agree with it. And it's, they talk about, Rich Cooper talks a lot about the divorce rate being 50% and 80% of women initiate divorce. It's like, yeah, 50% of marriages also work too. If everyone was saying, man, you got a 1 in 2 chance of being successful, you'll probably be more inclined to look towards marriage. And 80% of marriages fail, not because the woman just wants to go to someone else, it's because they don't get help in the home. So it's like the guy goes out and works, she's raising the kids, doing everything. No wonder, like, kids alone is difficult enough. It's like, get a nanny, get a chef, get a cleaner. Why don't you fucking help out a little bit to try to create a little bit more harmony instead of listening to this absolute garbage and then following that from a book of guys that are like, they're like boys, essentially. Like, they're like boys running the show. It's boy psychology. That's what it is. And they just perpetuate it through the hatred of women. So they're just feminists. They're doing the same thing as feminists are doing, like screeching, follow your pleasure, don't control your lust. Like, okay, man, if that's the life you want to live, then go for it. But that's not what I consider a healthy masculine man.
What advice would you give to men these days who are obviously dealing with influencers like Andrew Tate and up against feminism, which are calling you toxic if you're being masculine or whatever? What's some advice that you give men today and how to navigate through all of that? What
Yeah.
do they do? What should they focus on?
Look, some of those guys, they do give good advice. Like, Rich gives some good advice, Tate gives some good advice, but it's like, you can still drink tap water and survive, but it doesn't mean that it's good for you. It's like kind of like that stuff. So sure, get your physicality in check and all that. Like, getting your physicality, making money, that should just be standard. Like, you're not a high value male if you make more than 100 grand a year and you go to the gym. Congratulations, you do what should be biologically necessity for you to survive. You're not a high value male. The first thing is you've got to move from boy psychology to man psychology. That requires an internal separation from mother and father. So you've got to stop being dependent on them. And if they're not around and you're still harboring resentment, anger, criticism, judgment towards them, you need to go and work on that, because otherwise you're going to internalize that towards yourself. And then you'll become your own mother and father internally towards the inner landscape of who you are. So you won't ever be able to break free of that. Firstly, that's what I would be doing, is looking at your psychology, what's showing up in the world, reading healthy influences, working on the body and making money. That's not really that difficult. It's actually not. It should be the basis of entry. So the first thing I would do is don't listen to them. They talk about women being degenerates, yet they're creating the very problem that they're fighting against by saying sleep with at least 50 women by the time you're 35. So it's like, and without being crass, it's like, you become a homemaker. They talk about hoes, but then they become homemakers themselves. And it's like, then they complain about it. It's like the whole system is just super effeminate to me. So I would say don't listen to them. Understand your own nature before you try to understand female nature. Go to yourself first, because you're the common theme in your life. Every fuck up, every problem, every difficulty you face, you're the common theme in your life. Wherever you got problems, you're always going to be there. So it's better to work on your own internal psychology, work on healing that, work on overcoming that, work on going from boy psychology to man psychology. If guys have what you want, don't listen to people that haven't done what you want to do. So find your purpose. As a man, it's like, get out there and find something purposeful to live in the world and give back to the world. There's no greater contribution than that. That might be becoming a father. It might be doing something like what I do. It might be a person, whatever it is. It doesn't really matter. You'll only get there once you transcend the internal boy psychology, though. Otherwise, if you don't transcend internal boy psychology, you end up like a 50-year-old pretending you're an alpha saying this is the way to go and just enjoy the decline, right? That's not the way. That's compensatory, and you won't really get anywhere. You might have a lot of money and buy a new car and all that. I got expensive stuff. I like expensive watches. I've got expensive cars. I've got all that, but I don't use that to define myself as a man. That's a byproduct of me just having fun in life. But I wouldn't say to men to not go towards marriage, to not have children. That's the next phase that I'm in, because I believe when you reach a spiritual maturity as a man, that's where you go to. That's what comes as the ultimate, because that's the ultimate sacrifice. I heard a good quote that if a man doesn't have children or a wife, then masculinity just goes out into the woods to die. And that speaks very truly to me, because I believe, again, masculinity is about sacrifice. That's the highest order of masculinity for me. So look where you can sacrifice. Look where you can improve your own internal psychology. Look where you can be of service and benefit to the world and be a producer, not a consumer.
Yeah, I agree with all of that. Looking at like the current situation in the world at the moment, I mean, I know you follow my content, so you know what what kind of stuff I put out there. But recently, I've realized a lot of the stuff that I do is quite, I feel anyway, in my masculine,
Mm-hmm.
because I'm like going against the system, I'm fighting against authorities, I'm finding all these things in the law, loopholes, all that kind of stuff. And I've come to a point where like I did it as a means of survival because
Yeah.
I had to in the last 4 years, especially during the real tyrannical times. But now I don't feel like it's natural for me. And I actually feel that that's a man's kind of role to take over that kind of stuff. And yes, it's great that I know how to get by in tough situations. And, if I ever came across a corrupt police officer, I know what I can do. But yeah, I've sort of deviated away from that. Like I do like to, that's why I like to have men on to talk about it. But I don't want to be dealing with that anymore because I just feel like it's taken me out of my feminine and put me in a masculine state. It's not natural for me. It's forced.
Mm.
So in saying that, like with what's happening now in society, how should the men, where should they be taking control and what should the women be doing?
I think the only way really to save this society is family, is recreating marriage and family. Whether that's through Christian, Catholic, it's not really about that.
Mm.
It's about creating what society's tried to destroy, which is the family unit. The family unit is the most powerful unit on earth, connected under God as a husband, wife, children. That's why it's like, if you look at that, that's a pyramid, and they'll invert that to be upside down. Everything's inverted, as you know, in this society. And so now what I believe is the true thing is the man needs to be capable to figure out how to make money, to be dangerous, but not a dangerous, Jordan Peterson says, to be emotionally healthy. That's a really important one. It's not about sitting around and talking about your feelings all the time. All that usually does is strengthen the muscle of being insecure and unstable, right? But it's about, for men, developing resilience and capacity. Resilience and capacity are two of the tenets that I say, go and do hard shit, go do the things that you don't want to do. It's not going and just boxing in a gym or anything like that. It's facing yourself to the point where, I mean, this happened to me last year, where I had a near-death experience and I had to face everything I hadn't dealt with, even though I have a propensity for that. And my health was absolutely fucked. It was absolutely fucked. I was having brain zaps, heart palpitations. I didn't sleep for 5 months. Like my blood was so thick, I should have had a stroke, because it was like I was just in this relationship and my life. My father died. My godfather died. One of my oldest friends of 26 years died in a 6-week period. Plus I was ending a relationship, found out she was like cheating and lying and doing all of that stuff. And it was like, I found out like she was using super high level manipulation tactics on me that I didn't even see. I'm the fucking dude that sees everything, and I didn't see that. That's how good she was. And it just took a toll on my health. And I was like, I will do whatever it takes to heal this. This isn't what I'm here to do. I'm not here to tap out yet. And I remember one night I was having seizures at night, and I woke up and having a seizure, and I was like, I could feel myself splitting from my body. It was like Velcro being ripped. And I started to pray. I said, God, if this is it, just take me home. and I was in a field of white light, and then Jesus appeared to me, didn't say anything. And then it was like a van door slamming and I was back in my body. I don't know how long I was there for or whatever, but I was pushed to death to face everything I needed to face. And that was, where wasn't I being fully authentic? Why was I allowing this? What was going on that I didn't see this? Why didn't I want to see it? And it was super profound because it was, this woman had come in, it was love disguised as abuse. Not that she was being loving in the human form, but from a spiritual perspective, what she did was broke all the walls down around my heart for any authenticity that wasn't left. So I could face that and go into a healing phase, which I did. I spent 5 months healing, and I was spending more than $10,000 a month on different therapists so I could get through it. And there were times where I was like, I'm out, I'm going to die. Like, this is bad. I was seeing like brain specialists, cardiologists, like the whole bit, because I was that close to death. And I faced it, and I was like, this is what I have to do. And I'll do whatever the fuck it takes to move through this, because this isn't going to win. I'm not going to let this win. Most people, when they face something in life, they go, I'll do my best, or yeah, I tried one or two things and it didn't really work. I was like, I don't care. Like, I'm going to solve this and figure out what's going on. And I did. And that's what it takes as a man. It's like, you need to front up and be like, how do I do this? I'll figure it out. You want to make a woman feel safe? 3 words: I'll handle it. That's pretty much it. It's like, you need something, I'll handle it. I will handle it. I'll handle it. One of the things my ex used to say, she goes, the thing I love about you the most is, she goes, you just fucking handle it. And that's what we're meant to do. So it's like, learn how to handle things, learn how to handle your emotions, learn how to handle your rage. Like, rage, grief, all of it. The bottom line for everything is sadness. But the sadness is a stress relief through tears. It's a biochemical release. Once that stress is gone, that version of you that you're holding on to, which then creates thoughts as well, which recycle and enforce feelings and keep going, that part of you goes. So you have to go through the death of a version of you in order to show up, and that will develop the resilience and the capacity. Like, most families that are developed, the woman feels she's the source of love of everything. While the woman can be the source of love, the man wraps that up and protects that. That's how it's supposed to work. You have that back in society. We restore men, we restore masculinity. We restore masculinity, we restore marriage. We restore marriage, we restore connection to God. We restore connection to God, we restore society. And then this evil that's in the world wouldn't even try to do what it got away with these days, because it wouldn't win, which it won't anyway. It won't win because lower based emotions of evil, greed, shame, hatred, violence, they're long, slow waves. Higher waves are like courage, neutrality, peace, joy. They're stronger. Those waves are where we're going through by breaking through the shadow component of our society. We can't help but emerge into a higher space. That's where it's going. Like, everything's about evolution. It's constantly evolving. It can't stay in this. It has to break down. And that's what I feel we're in at the moment. So I see a resurgence, and I believe that men embracing their masculinity, restoring the family is the answer. That's what I see as the answer.
Well, what I'm finding in my personal experiences, one of the most common issues with men is that they struggle to regulate their emotions.
Yeah.
Where I find they're either like fully blocked and like there's like nothing there, like fully shut off, or they're like too emotional and they can't control it, and they're like can get aggressive, or they can get, I guess, more emotional than me.
Yeah.
Interesting, because back in the day, maybe in the 1900s or whatever, men seem to be quite shut off from their emotions. But now we've gone from, the pendulum has swung from one extreme to the other, where we've gone from not having emotions to not knowing how to kind of deal with them, or people encouraging men to be emotional, but it's not in a healthy way either.
Yeah.
And as you said earlier, like, as a man, to come home, you're not supposed to unload all your emotions onto your woman, sort of thing.
Yeah.
So how can that man achieve balance between that and not go from one extreme to the other? Like, I find this is probably the biggest challenge, in my opinion. Seeing.
So the first thing we have to do is stop. Like, if you want, like, what I consider a good example of masculinity, there's a show called 1883. It was a 1 year, 1 season thing that was a precursor to the show Yellowstone. And it's just a father taking his family across the country doing what needs to be done. Now, in modern times, women go, oh, he's shut down, he's not dealing with it. It's like, no, he's fucking handling it. Like, watch it. It's excellent. Like, it's only 1 season, 8 episodes. is excellent. The love he has for his daughter and his family and his wife, like that's it. That's what real masculinity is. So the first thing that men have to do is stop honoring every feeling that goes on. That's the first thing. The second thing is they need to incorporate movement into their processing capabilities. Men heal and process through movement and doing things. We're different to women. Women are whole brain. Men are more left brain. We process things through the cerebellum. So roughhousing is super important for boys. We don't want to roughhouse boys anymore. What we want to do is wrap them up, put them in a gender neutral classroom and make them question what they are. It's absurd. And so that's developing mental health issues. Like I don't say, I'm in my 40s, right? I don't see, and Robert Kennedy said this. He goes, we don't see people in their 40s and 50s walking around wearing helmets and autistic. It's not very common, right? If we do see someone in that space now that's autistic, chances are they're probably a psychopath. There's a big misdiagnosis between psychopaths as autistic, and you can take tests online to see if you're autistic and it'll probably show up. But most people that are in my generation are likely psychopaths, which that's a whole different conversation. But what we need to do is make sure movement, roughhousing, wrestling, the aggression principle is directed in the right way. There's nothing wrong with aggression in competition. It needs to be done. It's when we're told to flex the muscle of emotion. That's like going to the gym and I just work my biceps all the time. My biceps are going to be disproportionately bigger to the other muscles I don't use. And so the boy or the man that's continually honoring his emotions becomes more unstable and more insecure. Instead of going, oh, you know what? There's a rush of heat in my body at the moment. I'm just going to wait for that to cool down before I actually do anything. And if you're in with your woman and you're having an argument, you say, I'm getting really fired up right now. I'm going to step away so I don't say something I regret. So can you give me half an hour and I'll come back to you? That's mastery. It doesn't mean you don't feel anything. It just means you don't act on it. That's the important thing. You don't act on it. That's why there's the saying, sleep on it and cooler heads prevail. Like heat goes up in the body. And that's why you see cartoons, steam will be coming out of the ears and the head will be red because anger is heat, hatred is heat, rage is heat. It travels up the body into the head and explodes out. You become unconscious the more angry you get. You step out of your body. You become disconnected. So it's about connecting to the anger, which is a boundary setter that actually says, stay away from me, because what you're doing right now is saying something that's triggering a part of me. And because I honor all my feelings and it's all my feelings and feelings and feelings, I'm going to make you responsible for that because I can't be responsible for it. Anger is a mechanism used to justify blame, to hide our sadness or our vulnerability from feeling weak. Vulnerability isn't weakness. Your vulnerability when you're hiding something. That's what creates vulnerability and our propensity to push it away. So the masculine aspect of that is through aggression. The feminine aspect is through manipulation. That's the difference. It's just that we think that the aggression principle, the violence principle has a different impact. But in all the people I've worked with, from sexual trauma, physical trauma, emotional trauma, psychological is the worst. And so manipulation and gaslighting has a detrimental effect on someone that doesn't have a healthy sense of self. And so physical aspect, and neither are good. They're both equally as bad, but it's not one side of the scale where it's just men committing violence. There's emotional and psychological violence. I was susceptible to that from my mother, my ex, like quite badly, but it's like, I've got a solid, stable internal sense of self where I can now see and go, okay, cool. I can heal that and it doesn't affect me anymore. So it's about being physical, learning how to process through movement and being around other men. Men teach men or boys how to be men, not women. Just the same way as I don't know how to train a girl to be a woman. I would leave that to the women. But there seems to be, and when I post stuff like this, I get a huge kickback from women. I'm like, I'm a man. I've transcended my boy psychology into man psychology. I know the path intimately and very well. Why would you want to change that? Like it's just natural biology. And so, if I have daughters or, one daughter, one son, whenever they turn 7, the son's going to come with me, not exile the mother, but like the main influence is going to be with me. The girl is going to go with her and I'll just provide the safety for her and be reliable for her. So it's this roughhousing needs to be brought back. And if I have a son, you're like 100% I'll be doing jiu-jitsu with him very quickly. and teaching him how to box and fight and, take him out into trees and jumping off waterfalls and all that sort of stuff so he can get physical. And I'll have his little mates around him where he can wrestle them and fight them. 100%.
Yeah.
So that's a really important aspect, is to go join jiu-jitsu, go join boxing, go learn how to fight, go hunting, whatever it is, or learn to build shit. We
Yeah.
need to do that, and that helps us process.
Yeah. Well, when I think about, for me, an ideal family dynamic, as a woman, obviously, like I have my own business at the moment and I work, but when, I meet my counterpart, I don't want to be working, to be honest. Like I want to focus on procreating with my partner and spending all that time with my kids, raising them, and yeah, not having to be out in the workplace and trying to earn money and all that kind of stuff. Like for me, I would like the man to provide in that aspect, while I do the nurturing. In today's day and age, obviously, as you're aware of, like women are being encouraged to work, and you see women who they'll work until like 8 months of pregnancy, and then they'll go back to work like when the kid is one. For me, I don't feel like that's a healthy environment for kids, because they need that nurturing for many years, like the first few years, right? And I get it, because at the moment in society, there's inflation, living costs are high. So sometimes people don't really have a choice, and then there has to be two income earners. What do you think about that? Like, how can we get around that? Do you have any advice or insight to that kind of situation?
Yeah, it's a really good thing. I was watching this TV show a year or two ago, and I saw the women arguing about who went back to work more quickly, the quickest after having kids. I
Mm.
was like, dude, really? Like, oh, it's so unattractive to me, that. Like, it's just like, it's like repellent, I'm like, it's not natural. The woman needs to be taken care of. So the way I look at that is, and I saw this in, like, my previous relationship. She had an ex-husband, just couldn't get it together, like couldn't make it, couldn't stick to anything, all that sort of stuff. This comes back to resilience and capacity. Like, when you, short of the woman having strong narcissistic tendencies or borderline, or really strong wounding around letting a man lead, and there's a lot of those around, that can be very difficult, and that's the product of our society. It's not their fault, but it is their responsibility to fix it. So you'll get women that don't want to be looked after, because them being looked after means they have to surrender the part of them that wasn't looked after, which can be a very challenging, self-accountable process that they need to go through. Whereas for me, it's like, I figured things out. This is just my model. I like an asymmetrical response to life. So most men now have an asymmetrical response emotionally. So they're highly reactive. Me, when I look at my life, I'm asymmetrical. So I work maybe 2 hours a day. I make in excess of $500,000 a year. I only work 10 hours a day. That's it. I could make a lot more if I wanted to keep working, but I don't need to, because then I take my money, I invest it. I only invest bits of money where I can make a massive return. I don't like invest in property and stuff like that, because I have to get a lot of money with a symmetrical return of something small, or a fund which gives me 10% or 5%. I'd rather put 50,000, make 100 grand in 3 months, take it out, and then put it into preserve it in something. So it's like, I've designed my life so when I have children, I only have to work, or I don't have to work for a while if I don't want to, but because I'll keep doing my work because I love it, I only have to work 1 to 2 hours a day, and then I can be with them. I've designed my life for that. So then I'm still on point, on purpose. I've got heaps of time. She can be looked after. The kids can get as much access to me as they want. And then I'm not worried about being dependent on finances or having to work 10 hours a day or 12 hours a day. I've done all that. And
Mm.
so you have to have a strategy to design for a longer time, to say, well, if I bring kids into the world, then how do I want that? What do I want that to look like? You know, how do I want to be around them all the time? Or, do I want to be working 10, 12 hours a day? So what you mentioned before is like, dual incomes and people not having a choice. I think everyone has a choice. It's just, how far are you willing to go to live the life that you want? How far are you willing to look into it? How hard are you willing to work? When I started doing this 6 years ago, I would do sessions in the middle of the night for people. I was doing 40, 90-minute sessions a week, which is heaps. You know, I was that's 60 hours a week just doing sessions. Then I was also writing for 4 hours a day to figure out the operating software of the psyche. And I did that for 4 years. You know, so a woman called me privileged once because I live in Byron Bay, and she got upset because I was paying a lot for rent, which was over the market asking. And she goes, yeah, well, you're privileged. I said, I was fucking sleeping on an office floor eating 2 tins of tuna a day because I had no money. I'm sure you wouldn't do that. I just took advantage of the opportunity that I was given, and I wasn't going to give in. Most people wouldn't do that. So now I'm in the position where that discipline allowed me to get to this place where I can say, cool, when I bring my wife in and kids, I can say, you don't ever have to work if you don't want to. And then my kids will be given opportunities that I wasn't given because my family taught me that. And I can say, you want to, like, if I have a daughter, do you want to go horse riding? If my son wants to learn archery, whatever it is, I can say comfortably, I will support you in whatever you want to go to. It's my job just to try to insulate you from as much trauma as possible, but give you the opportunity to find out who it is that you want to become in the world, not project my fantasy to say, you need to be my unfulfilled dreams, which a lot of parents do, rather provide them the opportunity, which I've designed through asymmetrical attitude to life, and saying, well, I got to take care of them. And there's no greater like benefit. I like being under pressure. I love it. So it's like, put my back against the wall. That's where you get the best out of me. So what better way to do that than have a family, have a wife, have children? But the first thing you got to do as a man is commit to yourself. Because if people go, what's the first thing? I'm like, go make a fucking living. Because if you can't make a living or commit to yourself, you can't commit to anyone else. It's not going to happen. And then you're going to bring in a woman that you want to mother, that wants to mother you, and that you want to mother you. And you're never going to break out of the family dynamic. That's just going to be repeating what's already happened.
Yeah, I love that you're setting your life up in a way where when the time comes, everything is in order, in order to be able to have a healthy family environment and raise children, providing what their needs are. And I think that's really important because there is a mentality in society where you get together with someone and then that's when you start, you start trying to fall pregnant. And then when you're, yep, pregnant, cool. All right, let's start like putting things into, do you know what I mean?
Figure it out.
Yeah. And I'm really big on preparing years before that, especially your body. Like obviously, I'm a naturopath, and I think that to bring another child into this world, your body needs to be in a certain condition and state in order to pass on healthy genes and not, your weaknesses physiologically. Not only that, but you also want to cultivate an environment that's not going to promote lack mentality. A lot of kids have grown up in environments where parents can't afford this, and that then perpetuates an abundance block for the child. Like all these psychological things that come from just because parents did not prepare enough. And I think you have a responsibility as a human being, as an adult, if you're going to bring a child into this world, right, who can't fend for themselves in the first few, like
For a
two,
while.
yeah, for however long, 18.
15 years probably.
Yeah, you need to be able to provide all their needs, right? And you're responsible for all of that. And you have to be very cautious and aware of also doing the work within yourself so that you're not parenting in a way where you're, I guess, creating negative programs, negative beliefs in the child. And I think that's so important because that way we can continue society and create generations that are a lot more solid and are not carrying all these, generational traumas, I guess you could say, or issues, and spending 20 years of their life trying to peel back the layers. I mean, I'm almost 30. I reckon I've spent the last 10 years of my life trying to like heal a lot of stuff that I guess I'm not blaming my parents, but took on board because of them and their traumas, you know what I mean? So yeah, I guess what I'm trying to say is like it's so important that you do the work emotionally, mentally, physically before you bring another being into this world.
Yeah, and it's a beautiful awareness you've got. So your children will benefit immensely. So what's the best way to reinforce generational trauma? Start a war. It's like you get a war-bred generation. So World War I, World War II, Vietnam War now. I don't believe we're on the verge of World War III. I don't think it's going to happen. I think there are too many people that are just like, nah, mate, it's not going to happen this time. I think it's fear mongering, because if they were going to do it, they'd probably just do it. Why would they tell us? You know, it's like, why would they be threatening it? It's like, I don't see it as happening. It's to create more fear to keep everyone trapped. But if you get like, you know, boomer generation too, like the boomer generation were the product of the World War I and II parents, completely emotionally stunted and inept. And so then you get boomers, which are like, oh, it's your fault that you were brought up like that. It's like, we put a roof over your head and fed you. It's like, you don't get a badge of honor for doing the responsibility that you took on. But fortunately, that's created a generation like us, which has been like, well, I don't really want to repeat this. It really has brought in a complete generation of chain breakers, me and you being part of that culture, where I'm like, when I went into the I'll do whatever it takes, it's because I knew, I'm like, none of this is going into my child. None of it. Not one part of it. So whatever I have to do to overcome everything that I've gone through to shatter me into a million pieces, I'll fucking do it, because my little girl, my little boy is not going to take the shit on that I took on. I've done enough work. It ends with me. And so the attitude that we have around it, while it's been an immensely difficult journey, it's directly correlated to the gratitude and the satisfaction that I now get to get out of life because of it. So our greatest tragedies are meant to be, you know, transcended into our greatest triumphs and transformed and transmuted and worked through, so we can go out into the world and go, oh, okay, cool. I can't wait to have my children, because I know they'll be emotionally healthy. I know they'll be capable. And I know that what I can bring is an immense amount of value, because I understand how the human psyche works. So I can guide them through a process where they're not going to be as fucked as the previous generations. And that will change the world.
Yeah, I love that. We're kind of breaking the repeating patterns in that way as well when you think about it.
And then they don't have to carry that. They can move into like their authentic expression, which is much more closely connected to God,
Yes.
without having to be broken into like, you know, self-doubt and self-hatred and self-loathing, and attract in situations of abuse and sexual assault and rape, because it's like your previous generations didn't sort that out. So
Yeah.
now it's like we get to experience what it would be like. And I think that, you know, by doing that, they'll get to understand and see the beauty in the world straight away, and the magnificence of this architecture. And then you get to play the divine game as opposed to playing the survival game, which most people never get to break out of because of those emotional addictions I was mentioning earlier, where they will take that to the grave. They take their suffering to the grave. And most people don't get to break free of it, but I'll make sure my kids don't have to break free of it, because I'll never be in it.
Mm. And that right there is the key to overcoming everything that we're dealing with at the moment, in my opinion, and
100%.
creating better future solid generations that cannot fall so easily from psychological warfare, you know, the snowflake society that's going on.
Yeah.
That wouldn't be possible if we, you know, approach things like that, and they didn't have to spend all those years going through unnecessary interactions because of those programs that were developed in the beginning. So
Yeah. I think, you know, and that's a great point, because it's like I look at it and I see like just this like utter perfection in how everything runs from a divine aspect, not a human aspect anymore. And why do you think they're trying to stop people having kids? They know that their time is up, and children coming through now are of a much higher quality than the previous generations. So the level of consciousness that is expanding and evolving into this new world that's being born, that old stuff cannot coexist with the new stuff that's been born. So they want to block the lines of children coming in, because they know it's going to be like, they won't even have to break free of anything, because I'll just go, you guys let people control you, and you had these forced shots. Like, what do you mean? Like, I don't get it. It's like, don't worry about it. You'll never have to worry about it. It won't even come into their consciousness, because they'll be so connected. They'll just be like, what do you mean? Like, you what? Like, you did that? You listened to some psychopaths? Like, all right, bro, no worries. Cool. Thanks anyway. You know, it's like, it'll be like that. They won't even have to address that, because they'll be so more attuned to what's right and what's natural and harmonious.
And that explains why there's so much attack on the family unit, where, you know, even when you have the family courts, often see situations where the parent that is clearly the one that's causing a lot of issues gets away with everything, and the actual good parent loses the kid or whatever. Like, I see that happen a lot, because in my mind, I know what they're doing. They want to create a weak society. You know,
Yeah.
they want traumatized kids, therefore then they don't have solid foundations, and then, you know, it all goes downhill from there. Promoting promiscuity with men and women, you know, then you have unfaithful relationships, and, you know, that cultivates a very toxic environment full of lack of trust, lack of integrity, lack of honor,
Yeah.
family gone, children traumatized. So, like, you know, a lot of their attacks is on the family unit. And because they know the power that lies in, if you have a solid family foundation and unit, what that child can be capable of when
Yeah.
they're ready to, you know, go out into the world. So yeah, it makes a lot of sense when you are aware of that.
Yeah. And it's really important. Like you look at, I don't know if you've seen the show Yellowstone. I don't watch a lot of TV, but Yellowstone's really good. It's about generational protection of a ranch that everyone keeps trying to take. And so the family's not exactly the healthiest expression, but the loyalty of the family, they fight for something. They stand for something. And when we have healthy grandfathers that produce healthy fathers, like you could say patriarchy. Patriarchy just means father-led, but they've washed that out into be like, oh, it's the domination of women and abuse of women and whatever. That's not true. It's from a Greek word. I can't remember what it is. It just means led by the father. That's it. That's all it means. The funny thing is about that is that the feminist movement complains about being controlled and dominated by men, but then they try to control and dominate men in the same way they've been controlled and dominated. So they haven't actually gone anywhere with it. But it's like, if you look at the space of that, it comes down the line in that show of they fight for something and stand for something. And when you have a family that's loyal, that's bonded like this, the family is the thing that you fight for. The family is the thing that the man puts himself in front of to protect. You develop men like that, the boys follow. Then the boys protect their wife, their children, and it goes down the line and it continues. Then what they want to do, break up the family so the children get raised by the state. You got a family, the state can't raise the children. Just won't happen. So we're in a very, very, very interesting time. This will be the most interesting time of our life, that's for sure. Definitely.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. So tell us what you do. Like, I know you do one-on-one with people, helping them through their stuff and relationships as well. Like,
So I do some one-on-ones. I'm about to do a course on self-sabotage, which is maybe 6 weeks. I don't know yet. I'm writing it out, and it's been a pretty big body of work. It'll be at least 4 weeks, helping people to understand and overcome that, because it's kind of like it's one aspect of the operating software of the psyche. And once you see it, it's and unravels people at a pretty deep level pretty quickly. So I'm going to call it mastering the inner game, self-sabotage, because once we stop self-sabotaging, we become free to operate authentically. So I'm going to do that in a group. I do private mentorships as well, where I teach my method to people. So my thing's all about the operating software of the psyche, which I've mentioned. It was that chain that I spoke about, the vibration word, etc. It's about reverse engineering things to crack people open and make the unconscious into consciousness and help them integrate that so they have a different experience. But I also use physics to do it, because everything oscillates at a frequency. What's unconscious will control us at a frequency. Once you see it, that oscillation changes, the vibration shifts, and then you'll see things collapse into form that are a different result of what you have previously had. So yeah, I won't keep going with that, because then we'll be here for another hour. But so I do one-on-one, I do one-on-two, which is relationship work. I teach this stuff to people as well. Yeah, that's pretty much what I do. That's pretty much what I do.
what do you find in relationships to be the biggest challenge or issue?
Yeah, good question. Most people are trying to get the other person to resolve the parental wounds. They just don't know it. So it's like the two biggest things are self accountability and responsibility, that partner is not your parent, that you've attracted them in. This is why, like, if someone says, you know, I've met the one, and I'm like, how long are you known them? Like a week. I'm like, run the other way, because there's a thing that shifts, and this person has like a energetic signature that is similar to a parent. So all of those butterflies, everything else, like butterflies are in the same place you get IBS. So that's a warning sign for starters. That's not necessarily good. That's anticipation. That's fear and excitement, which is confused as love and intensity because that's the way you grew up as a kid. And this person that you've brought in represents a parent that is about to meet your needs, but is not about to meet your needs. So the romantic side of things, the honeymoon phase, is where we get intoxicated. We think that it's love, and that's not love. And then the power struggle comes after that. And so what I would say is that relationships are really, the way I see it, are two sets of belief systems that come together. Person one is a set of belief systems, person two is. That starts to wrestle with each other. And when we start to break up, what happens is these beliefs are no longer in line with these beliefs, and that person goes away, and we mistake those beliefs with the person being responsible for them being the source of the love we're experiencing, but they're not. So it's when this person goes away and we go, I don't know who I am without that person, you're actually saying, I don't know who I am without those beliefs. And that's where the grief comes in. The grief is the stress response we get to release. And then we get to say goodbye to that part of us that we confuse with the other person that we try to hold on to. That's the mechanism that the ego uses to make you stay in the same cycle. So seeing that is the first thing. I was working with a couple that have been married for 25 years just this morning. And I said to them, you guys haven't actually been in a relationship with each other. You've been in a relationship with your own childhood programming for 25, 26 years. And so both of them had actually, it's really funny. They both had affairs in the family. One of them was a product of affair. You know, he was unfaithful. And then what he was using the unfaithful thing for in the relationship was to create drama. So the wife would tell him off just the same way that the mother would tell him off, because getting attention is the way that he confused getting love by getting into trouble. So it's not that because he's like, infidelity is the problem. No, it's not. And when I work with couples and I say, like, if the man's cheating or the woman's cheating, infidelity is not the problem. It's the negative emotional addiction that they're trying to satisfy in the relationship that becomes the problem. So people are fighting all the time. One of them is going to be addicted to being right. The other one is going to be addicted to not being wrong. So the people that feel like they're always doing something wrong, they're going to have feelings of shame and guilt. Then the person that's always accusing them of something is going to have addictions to fear, jealousy, and insecurity. So this just plays out until we see it and then we resolve it. Quite often, two things happen. The relationship ends and they go, cool, you helped me, and we move apart. Or it ends and then they go into a higher version of the relationship. So the relationships here, the best thing, people go, what's the best thing I can do to heal? I'm like, get in a relationship. I had a good mate of mine say, yeah, I think I've transcended everything that I needed to transcend. I said, go back and get with your ex then and see if that's the truth, because it wasn't the truth. And so relationships are the container for healing. We need a wall to push up against. Find someone that is willing to walk with you into it together. So you have the me and the we. The we comes before the me. And then learn to communicate that with each other, especially as the man validator. Don't try to fix her. If you want to fix it, offer a solution, not try to fix her state. So one of the things that's really important from man to woman, they'll be like, I was speaking to a guy about this and he goes, his wife was feeling really down and out of sort of sorts with his family. She was upset. And he's just like, babe, just be yourself. Don't worry about it. And I said, cool, you just dismissed her. You just got dismissive. She's feeling something. You're going, don't worry about it, babe. Just be yourself. It's all good. Well, you need to sit down with and go, you know what? It makes a lot of sense that you'd feel this way and I'm here for you. Whatever you need. That's how you fix the state, not trying to fix it. So that's the one thing that men need to realize as well. Once you get through it and you transcend the inner dynamics of the child psychology, that's where I think you should probably move into wanting to get married. Like, I didn't get married for a specific reason. It was because I was dragging a lot of stuff with me that I didn't want to make her carry. And so now I'm through that and I'm in the full opening where I'm ready to give my heart to someone. Now it's like, okay, cool. She's not going to be at the whim of all the shit that I had to deal with first. And so now it'll be a cohesive, collaborative relationship instead of one of like, you owe me this and I owe you that and this wasn't good enough, but whatever, like that doesn't come up, you know? So that would be some of the most important thing. If you're in a relationship, realize that love takes work and it takes time and things get harder as it goes along. The more you ignore the things that are going on under the bonnet, you can drive and you can have all the warning lights in your car going off and you're just like, la, da, 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 like, I'll just ignore that. You got to fix that shit, because if you don't fix it in that relationship, and sometimes you got to walk away from the relationship, but you will attract it again and you'll attract it again and you'll attract it again. The initial relationships are all about resolving what goes on in our family, because that's what's going on within you. So then see relationships as an opportunity to break the chain. to end the familial trauma, to end your own trauma, and then you get to move into a higher state of what real family is about, based on love, not based on fear and attachment.
Mm. Yeah, it's amazing how much relationships bring up what you need to work on and highlight, where you're still continuing the family traumas or whatever you want to call it. It's interesting because the last relationship I was in, before I got into that, I felt, oh, I'm like, nothing bothers me. I'm so healed.
Famous last words.
Like I'm so healed. I've got my shit together. Start seeing someone, all my shit comes up. And but I'm very grateful for that because he highlighted all those wounds, he highlighted all those traumas and things that I was still playing out as a child in my relationships. And for example, my mother was very emotionally unavailable because she grew up in like a war-torn country, so she had to kind of shut off to survive. But she was also very needy and very victim. And I used to be very drawn to men that I parented and that were very needy of me. And I'm like, why am I doing this? And yeah, so it really helped me go back to my childhood and see where I developed those patterns and work on that. And yeah, so I'm sure a lot of people will have different things, but that was my kind of thing that I had to learn, and I'm sure I'm still learning. It's such a good tool to look at relationships as opportunities to take responsibility for yourself and where you might be needing to clear some programs or change the way you are, or more step into a more conscious, higher state. And naturally, either that person, they'll no longer like resonate with you, or they'll rise, kind of grow with you, if that makes sense.
Yeah, and it's a good point. It's like someone was asking me the other day, because I sort of sit in a space of like complete peace almost all the time now. I don't really get triggered.
Mm,
They go, "Oh, it'll be interesting to see when you have a kid." And I said, it's all good when it comes up when I have a kid. I just know that what happened in my family won't come up. And
mm,
that's all I care about. Like, I don't mind if I get frustrated or pissed off. I'll just own it. I'm not saying that I'm going to be infallible and nothing is ever going to affect me again. How boring would that be if nothing ever bothered you ever again? It's just like that's part of the understanding the broad range of the palette of the human condition, right? That's part of it. I came here to be human, not an avoidant human. But I just know that everything I've worked through, like, I thank God that my family history won't be passed down into that child. I can create my own family history and I'll fuck up and make mistakes, and I'm okay with that. That's how people learn. But I just know that my own family history won't be passed down, and that was the main thing. And so it's an important aspect in relationships to see that they constantly evolve and shift and change. And it
mm,
takes a deep commitment to do that, to move through it. I've done the whole womanizing thing and having multiple women at once and all that sort of stuff. That doesn't work. It's just, you're just covering something up. And so working through your own stuff in a relationship can be great. The difficult ones are usually the best teachers, though.
yeah, so true. And what kind of qualities do you think are important when it comes to, wanting to work through all that? So for example, willingness to look and take responsibility, I would say, is a really important one.
Yeah.
What other qualities do you think that people should have and harness when trying to work through these things?
Kindness, compassion, and gentleness for the man, understanding, nurturing, and love for the woman.
Mm,
But it's not going to be all roses and buckets of puppy dogs and rainbows all the time. But quite often, following the difficulty is going to be the reward.
mm,
It's like you get through a difficult thing. Repair is another thing. Learning how to repair with your partner is more important than the conflict itself. The other thing is the conflict isn't bad. My previous partner wanted zero conflict in a relationship, like zero. She's like, no, I don't want any conflict, none whatsoever. I'm like, well, that's a red flag because it's usually you that's pulling the shit behavior. So you're just using that as an excuse to not take a look at yourself because you're too fragile, because that pushes on a wound. And then if you push on that wound, that's going to be wanted to get away from, which is natural. It's understandable. But repair is super important. You can have conflict, but how you repair is really important. Like, one of the things I give couples is, when you're in conflict, if it's not going anywhere, lie on the floor together, hold hands like this, and look at each other. Try not to laugh when you do that. You can't help but laugh. So it's about changing the state, touch, connection, looking at each other, getting on the floor like kids, not rolling around acting like kids. Like, lie on the floor opposite facing each other and hold hands like this, you'll be laughing in like 30 seconds. Like, even if like one person will start to laugh because it feels so stupid, and then the other person can't help but laugh. You know, if you stick that out, it'll work. You can't help but change the state. And it's quite a beautiful practice because it softens everything. And then you can talk about it, you can understand it, and you can go through it with the person. So it's really learning to communicate, which is really important, and validate each other. Like, validation is super important. The opposite of that is to be dismissive. You know, my ex used to scoff at me when I was upset. And I used to fucking piss me off big time because it's so dismissive. And it's like, don't be dismissive. If you love someone, you want to understand them. There's no greater gift you can give someone than seeking to understand them through their eyes, not through how you think they should be for you, but through their eyes. That lowers the walls and goes, I'm in your world right now. And listen. I had a friend tell me recently when I was sitting with her, she goes, it's like you listen to me with your whole body. You're just here listening. I'm like, yeah, it's taken a long time to get to that point, but that's how I listen. I don't listen to filter something through and how I can respond. I like, listening is hearing with intent. Most people hear what they want to hear, but they don't listen. And so when you find the other person fascinating and I want to know about you, people can feel that. And you remain silent. You're not talking over people, jumping in, trying to interrupt, over explaining, all of that. Those are really important qualities too. It's like people actually find listening quite threatening. And it's a real skill to be able to get to listen to what someone isn't saying. And that's what I really sort of mastered in my work, is you listen to what someone isn't saying. As an example, in relationships, I always ask what people's needs are. Most people say safety, trust, communication. And it's like, what they're not saying is, unconsciously, my need is actually danger, betrayal, and stonewalling. It's the opposite. So if someone wants love, it's because they weren't loved. If they want safety, it's because they grew up in a dangerous environment. If they want trust, it's because they've been betrayed. If they want communication, it's because they've been stonewalled. So one really important thing to understand about your partner, the love languages and all that shit, they're cute, but they're not going to hit at the core of it. So it's like they want touch because they didn't feel nurtured as a child. They want acts of service because things weren't done for them as a kid. They were probably parentified. So go the opposite way. And so when you understand what your partner's needs are, like the guy I was working with this morning, his needs were to be understood, to be accepted, and to be loved. I'm like, cool, you want to be controlled, abdicate responsibility, and feel powerless. And he's like, oh, fuck. He'd never seen that. But in that, what he wants is, because if he wants to be controlled, powerless, and abdicate responsibility, there's a boy construct going on, because what he really wants is to be cared for. He wants those parts to be cared for. So it's interesting when you start looking at things in the opposing force to the way that we think that they are. Everyone's so focused on what my needs are, what my wants are, and someone service those. Deal with the shadow shit of you being like betrayed or violated, or, you know, whatever it is that's going on for you, that will expose that, and then you can work on it. That's the important part.
Wow. And that's where you're going to get those fundamental changes.
Yeah.
With that. Yeah.
Yeah.
Cool. And if
Yeah.
people wanted to get a one-on-one session with you, or how can they reach you? Like, what platforms do you have? Do you have a website?
Yeah, website is jaguarheart.co.co. I don't really change it that much. I'm pretty lazy with it because it's just whatever. A lot of my work comes through referral, but Instagram is kind of the platform where the overlords shadow ban me a lot. So Pure Jaguar, PureJaguar is probably the best resource for that. They can book a discovery call if they want to work with me one-on-one. Like I said, I do workshops, groups, one-on-one, two-on-one, and private teaching to teach coaches how to do this work.
And I'll put your information on the recording, on the video, for them to access as well. Thank you so much for your time. I really appreciate it. And
Thanks, Dave. Appreciate you too.
yeah, take care. And thanks for the work that you do for humanity.
And thank you for the work you do too. I've learned a lot from you, so I really appreciate you and respect you.
Thank you, Jaguar.
All righty.
Take
Ciao.
care. Bye.
Bye.